It all started on a quiet suburban street where everyone knew each other. And life moved at a calm, predictable pace. At first, the residents of the neighborhood thought it was just another friendly neighbor keeping an eye out. But they quickly realized that this wasn't ordinary concern, it was obsession. This HOA Karen, let us call her Linda, had taken it upon herself to monitor the comings and goings of every package in the neighborhood. From Amazon boxes to grocery deliveries, no parcel went unnoticed. At first, it seemed harmless. Neighbors would joke about her package patrol as she would walk around the block, notebook in hand, making notes about delivery times and which houses received parcels. But soon, her behavior escalated into full-blown harassment. Linda didn't just watch deliveries, she documented them meticulously. She knew when packages arrived, who signed for them, and sometimes even the estimated contents. If a package was left unattended on a porch, she would photograph it and report it to the HOA as a safety hazard, claiming it violated neighborhood rules about unattended deliveries. She sent emails and letters to homeowners, insisting that they either bring packages inside immediately or face fines. One neighbor, a young woman who worked long hours, received repeated warnings for leaving a small Amazon box on her porch for a single day. Linda's reports were filled with exaggerated claims, painting the minor oversight as a serious violation that threatened the neighborhood's safety and appearance. The obsession didn't stop at reporting. Linda began confronting neighbors directly. She would knock on doors, sometimes multiple times a day, demanding to know why packages had been left on porches, why they weren't moved inside, or why they weren't delivered at a certain time of day. Her confrontations were often aggressive and accusatory, leaving many residents feeling anxious or unsafe in their own homes. One neighbor described a situation where Linda accused them of being irresponsible and disrespectful, simply for leaving a package outside while they went to work. She even started leaving handwritten notes on packages, warning people that their actions were being monitored and would be reported to the HOA. The tension in the neighborhood grew as more residents became targets of Linda's package patrol. Some tried to ignore her, hoping she would eventually stop, but that only seemed to fuel her determination. She started showing up during deliveries, watching as delivery drivers placed packages and taking photos for her records. Residents began to dread the arrival of packages because it meant they might face scrutiny or confrontation. The atmosphere that was once friendly and relaxed became tense, with people constantly checking their porches and trying to time their deliveries to avoid Linda's attention. The situation reached a boiling point when a neighbor ordered a large furniture item that had to be delivered in the afternoon. Linda was waiting at the end of the street when the delivery truck arrived, and she immediately called the HOA to report the violation. The driver, confused and frustrated, had to deal with Linda's complaints while trying to complete the delivery. Meanwhile, the neighbor received a formal warning letter from the HOA, stating that leaving the package on the porch violated neighborhood guidelines, even though the delivery had been made exactly as instructed. Other residents began rallying in support of the neighbor, realizing that Linda's obsession had gone too far. Eventually, the HOA was forced to step in after multiple complaints from the neighborhood. They held a meeting to address the situation, and several residents shared their experiences, describing Linda's behavior as intrusive, unnecessary, and borderline harassment. While she insisted she was protecting the community, it was clear to everyone that her actions were creating fear rather than safety. The HOA implemented a rule that limited personal surveillance and clarified reasonable expectations for package delivery, effectively putting an end to her daily patrols. By the end of it, the neighborhood returned to its normal, peaceful rhythm, but the story of the package patrol Karen became the stuff of local legend. Residents still talk about how one person's obsession with control and perfection turned ordinary deliveries into a source of anxiety for everyone. Linda's actions serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of taking neighborhood oversight too far, and the importance of balance in community rules. What started as a simple concern for security ended up disrupting the lives of those she claimed to protect. Proving that sometimes, the craziest HOA stories aren't about big scandals, they about small, relentless obsessions that spiral out of control. In a peaceful suburban neighborhood, everything seemed calm and picturesque at first glance. Lawns were neatly trimmed, houses were freshly painted, and neighbors greeted each other with smiles. But beneath this idyllic scene, one HOA member had decided that perfection had a new sheriff. And her name was Karen. This particular Karen, who the neighbors quietly dubbed the lawn obsession Karen, was not just concerned about community rules or maintaining a pleasant environment, she was obsessed with controlling every blade of grass, every flower, and every shrub in the neighborhood. No matter how minor, nothing escaped her watchful eye, and she made it her personal mission to enforce her extreme standards. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. The first warning letters arrived in mailboxes, reminding homeowners to trim their lawns according to HOA standards. Most residents considered it routine and brushed it off, thinking of it as standard neighborhood regulations. However, as weeks passed, it became clear that this was no ordinary HOA enforcement. Karen began scrutinizing every lawn, taking photographs of grass that she deemed too long or not evenly cut. Her notes were meticulous, detailing measurements, dates, and even specific locations of flowers or garden decorations that didn't meet her arbitrary criteria. Some residents received multiple letters in a single week, each more condescending and insistent than the last, demanding immediate compliance or threatening escalating fines. Neighbors who once enjoyed casual gardening or letting their kids play freely in their yards found themselves under constant pressure. One family, whose lawn had always been well maintained, received repeated complaints simply because a small patch of grass grew slightly taller than Karen considered acceptable. Another homeowner planted seasonal flowers, only to receive a sharply worded notice claiming that the colors and arrangements violated neighborhood aesthetic rules. What had once been a simple joy, decorating a home and enjoying the outdoors, had turned into a stressful, high-stakes game where one misstep could result in angry confrontations or financial penalties. Karen didn't stop at letters. She began visiting homes personally, clipboard in hand, inspecting yards with an intensity that made neighbors uneasy. Her visits were often accompanied by lectures on responsibility, community standards, and the supposed dangers of non-compliance. She would pace back and forth, point at uneven patches of grass, and even measure distances with a tape measure, leaving homeowners embarrassed and frustrated. Children playing on the lawn or neighbors casually tending their gardens was sometimes interrupted by her relentless scrutiny. People who had lived in the neighborhood for years suddenly felt anxious stepping outside, afraid they might be reprimanded for something as simple as a dandelion growing near the walkway. Tensions escalated when Karen began enforcing fines with alarming zeal. Small infractions that would normally warrant a friendly reminder became official complaints that came with monetary penalties. One elderly couple received a $150 fine for letting their grass grow slightly past the HOA mandated length, despite the fact that they had always maintained their property with pride. Another family received multiple fines in the same month for seemingly minor issues. A crooked fence post, a garden gnome placed slightly off-center, and a patch of grass she considered uneven. The neighborhood began to buzz with whispers and complaints, as more and more residents felt the oppressive weight of Karen's obsession. The situation became so extreme that some neighbors started taking photos and videos of her inspections as a precaution, documenting her behavior in case disputes needed to be escalated to the HOA board or legal authorities. Meetings were called, and heated discussions ensued about whether her actions were justified or an abuse of power. Residents expressed frustration that one person's obsession with perfection had turned what should have been a friendly and cooperative neighborhood into a place filled with tension, anxiety, and fear of confrontation. Eventually, Karen's obsession caught up with her. The HOA board, faced with mounting complaints and undeniable evidence of harassment, decided to implement clearer, fairer rules regarding lawn maintenance and property inspections. They limited personal surveillance by residents, clarified realistic expectations, and put an end to Karen's aggressive inspections and excessive fines. While she continued to believe she was maintaining order, it became clear to everyone else that her behavior had crossed a line from responsible oversight to invasive control. In the end, the lawn obsession Karen became a cautionary tale for the neighborhood, a vivid reminder of how obsession with control, even over something as seemingly simple as a lawn, can disrupt lives and community harmony. Residents returned to tending their yards at their own pace, enjoying their outdoor spaces without fear of arbitrary fines or confrontations. The story of Karen's extreme lawn obsession serves as a humorous yet alarming example of how HOA regulations, when taken to the extreme, can turn everyday life into a source of stress and conflict. The neighborhood learned a valuable lesson. While rules and standards are important, balance and empathy are what truly keep a community happy and thriving. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where mornings were serene and evenings peaceful, one HOA member decided that the sound of everyday life was unacceptable. This Karen, later dubbed the noise complaint Karen by exasperated neighbors, had an obsession that went far beyond normal community concern. To her, even the most ordinary sounds, children playing, dogs barking, or neighbors enjoying a conversation in their backyard, were offenses worthy of complaints, reports, and even threats of fines. While most people thought of noise as a normal part of neighborhood life, this Karen treated it as a personal affront to her comfort and control. It all began innocently enough, with a few polite notes posted on neighbors' doors, a simple reminder about quiet hours, perhaps, or a gentle nudge about keeping voices down during late hours. Most residents thought little of it, assuming she was just conscientious. But soon, the notes escalated into detailed complaints, letters filled with citations, and demands for immediate compliance. Each letter contained exaggerated descriptions of noise, claiming that the volume of casual conversation or a dog's playful bark was disruptive enough to disturb the entire neighborhood. The tone was formal and intimidating, leaving residents feeling scrutinized and uncomfortable in their own homes. Karen didn't stop at written complaints. She began making personal appearances, often at odd hours, to inspect the noise herself. She would walk onto neighbors' properties unannounced, listening intently for any sound that she considered excessive. Children playing in their yards or teens enjoying music became targets for her relentless surveillance. She would confront homeowners directly, finger pointed, voice raised, and with an air of authority that suggested she had the right to control every sound in the neighborhood. These confrontations were often tense, leaving residents anxious and fearful of even minor, innocent noise. The situation worsened as she involved the HOA and even local authorities. Neighbors reported that she would call the police over trivial matters, claiming that her rights to silence and peace were being violated. One resident, simply hosting a quiet dinner with friends on a Saturday evening, found themselves interrupted by Karen, who insisted that their conversation volume violated HOA regulations. Another family experienced repeated visits from law enforcement after she lodged multiple complaints about their children playing in the backyard. The once friendly atmosphere of the neighborhood devolved into tension, with people hesitant to enjoy normal outdoor activities for fear of triggering Karen's wrath. Her obsession extended beyond ordinary noise. Even minor repairs, like mowing the lawn or using a power washer, was scrutinized. If the sound exceeded her subjective threshold, she would write formal complaints, take photographs, and insist that immediate action be taken to eliminate the disturbance. The absurdity of the situation became clear when a resident reported being fined for playing a musical instrument in their own home during the afternoon, a time traditionally considered reasonable for such activities. It was no longer about genuine community standards. It was about Karen asserting her personal preference over everyone else's freedom to live normally. Neighbors tried to reason with her, explaining that some level of noise was natural and inevitable in a populated community. However, their appeals were ignored. dismissed, or met with further harassment. The situation reached a point where residents began documenting every interaction with her, recording visits, letters, and phone calls to protect themselves from false accusations. Meetings with the HOA were tense, with multiple residents speaking out about the oppressive nature of her complaints and the psychological toll it was taking on the community. It became increasingly evident that her behavior was not about maintaining harmony but about control, power, and an obsessive need to micromanage the lives of those around her. Eventually, after mounting complaints and evidence of harassment, the HOA was forced to step in. They implemented new guidelines limiting how noise complaints could be filed and clarified the definition of reasonable sound levels. They also instructed residents that personal vendettas or excessive reporting could result in consequences, effectively putting an end to the most extreme behaviors. While Karen continued to believe she was upholding standards, the neighborhood could finally breathe again without fear of unnecessary scrutiny. The story of the noise complaint Karen remains a cautionary tale of how obsession, when left unchecked, can turn normal community life into a source of anxiety and conflict. Simple joys, like letting children play outdoors, enjoying a quiet conversation with friends, or tending to one's own home, became high-stress activities under her supervision. It serves as a reminder that while rules and order are important, empathy, balance, and respect for personal freedom are what truly maintain harmony in a community. Her extreme behavior left a lasting impression on the neighborhood, teaching residents the fine line between legitimate concern and controlling obsession. In the end, the noise complaint Karen demonstrated that even in a seemingly peaceful community, one individual's obsession could transform everyday sounds into conflicts, disrupt relationships, and create an atmosphere of fear. While the HOA eventually restored order, the story of her relentless vigilance continues to circulate as one of the most memorable, shocking, and cautionary examples of HOA drama gone too far. In a suburban neighborhood where weekend barbecues and casual gatherings were part of everyday life, one HOA member decided that no fun would go unmonitored. This Karen, later nicknamed the Party Police Karen by exasperated neighbors, took it upon herself to control every social event, no matter how small or harmless. What began as occasional complaints quickly escalated into full-blown confrontations, making her the most dreaded figure for anyone planning a party or casual gathering in the community. At first, her interference was subtle. A note slipped under a door, reminding residents of HOA rules regarding noise, guest limits, or party hours. Most people thought little of it, assuming it was routine and meant to ensure the neighborhood remained peaceful. However, the seemingly innocent reminders quickly turned into aggressive in-person visits. Karen began attending parties uninvited, claiming she needed to inspect and ensure compliance with regulations. Her presence at otherwise joyful gatherings was enough to unsettle everyone, as she scrutinized everything from music volume to the number of guests in attendance. Neighbors quickly realized that no party was safe from her interference. A simple backyard barbecue could result in lengthy lectures about noise levels, littering, or property boundaries. One family, celebrating their child's birthday with balloons and decorations, found themselves confronted by Karen, who insisted that the festivities violated HOA rules regarding public disturbance. She waved her clipboard, pointed fingers, and spoke in a loud, authoritative voice, creating tension and fear where there should have been laughter and celebration. The party came to a halt as guests and children alike froze, uncertain of how to respond to her tirade. What made the Party Police Karen especially notorious was her ability to exaggerate minor infractions into serious violations. A slightly loud cheer during a sports game or the laughter of friends gathered on a porch could trigger a formal complaint. She would take notes, photographs, and even make calls to the HOA, framing ordinary social interactions as disruptions to the community. Neighbors began to dread weekends, hesitant to invite friends or plan celebrations for fear of being reprimanded or fined. Events that were once a source of joy and connection became high-stress undertakings, requiring careful planning to avoid the wrath of one overly controlling individual. Her obsession extended beyond noise to what she considered moral or social infractions. Decorations, music choices, and even the types of games being played came under scrutiny. She criticized homeowners for what she deemed inappropriate themes, insisting that the community's appearance and reputation were at stake. Residents who tried to argue or defend their choices were met with condescension, aggressive explanations of HOA bylaws, and veiled threats of official action. Over time, her reputation spread throughout the neighborhood, and even newcomers were warned to tread carefully when hosting any social event. The psychological impact on the community was profound. Friends stopped visiting each other, block parties dwindled, and children no longer played freely in yards, knowing that Karen could arrive unannounced. The neighborhood, once lively and welcoming, began to feel tense and restrictive, with everyone constantly on edge. Her constant monitoring created an environment of self-censorship, where residents measured every action, word, and celebration to avoid attracting attention or complaints. The simple act of enjoying one's own property became a careful balancing act, as if the entire community were under surveillance. Eventually, the HOA board had to intervene. Complaints against Karen's overreach piled up, and it became clear that her behavior was disrupting the community rather than maintaining order. The board implemented guidelines for social events, clarifying reasonable expectations for noise and gatherings, and limiting personal enforcement by individuals. While Karen continued to insist she was protecting the neighborhood, the official measures finally curtailed her intrusive visits and unfounded complaints. Residents could once again host parties, celebrate milestones, and enjoy communal life without fear of an uninvited enforcer. Despite the resolution, the story of the party police Karen remained a cautionary tale. Her obsession with controlling harmless social activities highlighted how one individual's sense of authority could disrupt the lives and happiness of an entire community. The neighborhood learned that, while rules are necessary to maintain order, excessive enforcement and personal obsession could create an atmosphere of fear and tension. Laughter, fun, and shared experiences, once considered everyday joys, had been transformed into potential points of conflict under her watchful eye. Today, the party police Karen is remembered with a mix of frustration and dark humor. Residents share stories of her dramatic confrontations, exaggerated complaints, and the sheer absurdity of policing backyard barbecues and birthday parties. While the HOA eventually restored a sense of normalcy, the memory of her extreme interference serves as a reminder of how easily one person's obsession with control can overshadow an entire community's right to enjoy life. Her story stands alongside other infamous HOA incidents, illustrating that sometimes the most shocking conflicts arise not from major scandals, but from relentless, obsessive enforcement of minor rules. In a suburban neighborhood where families took pride in their homes and personal spaces, one HOA member decided that no renovation or improvement would go unchecked. This particular Karen, later called the renovation ruler Karen, by frustrated neighbors, took her sense of authority to extremes, believing that she had the right to control every detail of every home. From paint colors to fence styles, garden decorations to roof repairs, nothing escaped her scrutiny, and her obsession turned ordinary home improvements into a source of tension and anxiety for the entire community. The saga began innocuously enough. Homeowners who were planning minor upgrades, such as repainting their front doors or planting new flowers, received polite notes reminding them to submit requests for approval. Most residents complied, seeing it as a normal part of HOA oversight. However, Karen's involvement quickly became excessive. She insisted on inspecting every project personally, often arriving unannounced to measure, photograph, and critique each detail. A freshly painted fence could trigger hours of lectures on color shades, material choices, and compliance with aesthetic rules. Even when homeowners followed all formal procedures, she found minor imperfections that warranted further complaints. Neighbors soon realized that nothing was too small to escape her attention. A couple installing a new mailbox were scolded for choosing a style she considered inconsistent with the neighborhood's theme. Another family, adding a small patio extension, was reprimanded for not positioning it exactly according to her specifications. Her complaints were meticulous, citing obscure sections of HOA regulations and providing diagrams, sketches, and photographs to illustrate every perceived violation. Residents began to feel that no home improvement was safe from her relentless oversight. Karen's approach was not limited to written correspondence. She personally confronted homeowners, clipboard in hand, to lecture them on their mistakes. She would point at fences, roof tiles, and garden layouts, explaining why each decision was inappropriate or unacceptable according to her standards. Her tone was commanding and condescending, leaving homeowners anxious, embarrassed, and unsure how to proceed with even the simplest renovations. Families began postponing projects, afraid of attracting her scrutiny and the potential fines or complaints that could follow. The psychological toll of her behavior became evident. Homeowners reported feeling stressed whenever they planned improvements, constantly worrying about whether Karen would approve or intervene. Even minor changes, like replacing a garden gnome or adjusting the angle of a porch light, became sources of conflict. Neighbors who had once enjoyed personalizing their properties began to self-censor, fearing that any creative or functional decision might draw her attention. The neighborhood, once a place of pride and personal expression, transformed into an environment of caution and restraint under her watchful eye. The situation escalated when Karen began issuing fines and submitting formal complaints to the HOA for trivial infractions. A homeowner who installed a small birdbath received a letter claiming it violated aesthetic guidelines and threatened penalties if it was not removed. Another resident, who had replaced old shutters with new ones of slightly different shades, was told to revert the changes immediately or face escalating consequences. Her obsession with perfection turned every home project into a stressful ordeal, creating fear and resentment among the community members. Neighbors attempted to reason with her, explaining that their changes were functional, aesthetically appropriate, and within HOA guidelines. However, Karen dismissed their explanations, insisting that her personal judgment was final. She framed every minor deviation as a serious violation, exaggerating the impact on the neighborhood and portraying herself as the guardian of community standards. The tension reached its peak when a homeowner planning a simple backyard renovation faced repeated confrontations and multiple fines, making the project nearly impossible to complete without her interference. Eventually, the HOA board had to intervene. They reviewed her actions, listened to complaints from multiple residents, and clarified regulations regarding renovations and personal home improvements. Guidelines were implemented to prevent excessive monitoring by individuals, limit subjective interpretations, and ensure that approvals were fair and reasonable. While Karen continued to believe she was maintaining order and protecting the neighborhood's appearance, the official measures finally restricted her from micromanaging every home project. Despite the resolution, the renovation ruler Karen's legacy remained a cautionary tale. Her obsessive behavior demonstrated how one individual's desire for control could stifle creativity, instill fear, and disrupt community harmony. Residents learned the importance of balancing rules with common sense and respect for personal freedom. Homeowners returned to making improvements and personalizing their properties with confidence. But the stories of her relentless inspections, exaggerated complaints, and obsessive monitoring continued to circulate as a warning. The tale of the renovation ruler Karen serves as a striking example of how HOA authority, when taken to extremes, can invade private life and create unnecessary stress. It reminds communities that while standards are important for maintaining aesthetic harmony, excessive control and obsession over minor details can turn everyday activities into sources of anxiety and conflict. Her story joins the other infamous HOA Karen incidents, from package patrols to noise complaints, as one of the most shocking illustrations of obsessive enforcement gone too far. In the end, the renovation ruler Karen showed that obsession with control can overshadow community spirit, transforming a peaceful suburban neighborhood into a tense environment where even small, harmless home improvements are scrutinized and policed. Her story remains a powerful reminder that empathy, balance, and respect for personal autonomy are just as important as rules in creating a happy and harmonious neighborhood.